If you remember what it felt like to wait by a landline for someone to call, to navigate with a paper map folded incorrectly in your lap, or to experience true boredom without immediately reaching for a screen, you carry something most people today will never develop. You might feel out of step with the modern world, like you're constantly swimming against a digital tide everyone else rides effortlessly. But here's what psychology reveals: you're not struggling to adapt. You're operating with a cognitive framework that's become incredibly rare, and it gives you abilities that are vanishing from our collective skill set. In this video, we explore the 5 unique psychological strengths that develop when your brain forms during the pre-smartphone era. If you've ever been called technologically resistant, or felt guilty for preferring face-to-face conversation over texting, or noticed you can't multitask the way younger people seem to, what you're about to learn will completely change how you see yourself. These aren't weaknesses. They're adaptations that modern neuroscience is only beginning to understand. You possess what psychologists call sustained attention capacity, and it's becoming extraordinarily rare. Here's what's happening in your brain. When you grew up without constant digital interruptions, your prefrontal cortex developed the ability to maintain deep focus for extended periods without external stimulation. You learned to sit with boredom, to push through mental resistance, and to find engagement within a single task rather than constantly switching between inputs. This might show up as your ability to read an entire book in one sitting, to have a 2-hour conversation without checking your phone, or to work on a complex project for hours without needing a dopamine hit from social media. You might notice that when you do focus, you enter a state of flow that feels almost effortless, while people around you seem perpetually distracted. This isn't being slow or inflexible. This is possessing what researchers call deep work capability, a cognitive skill that's declining so rapidly that Cal Newport wrote an entire book about it as an endangered competency. Your brain literally wired differently during its developmental years, creating neural pathways for sustained concentration that don't form as readily when you're raised in an environment of constant interruption. This makes you exceptionally valuable in any field requiring complex thinking. You've developed genuine comfort with solitude, and this separates you from generations raised with constant connectivity. Here's the psychological mechanism at work. Your brain learned to self-soothe and generate internal contentment without external validation or entertainment. You grew up experiencing stretches of time alone with your thoughts, and your mind adapted by becoming a source of company rather than something to escape from. You might find yourself actually enjoying long drives without podcasts, taking walks without headphones, or spending entire evenings without feeling the need to document or share the experience. When you're alone, you don't immediately feel that anxious pull to fill the silence with digital noise. You can sit in a waiting room without reaching for your phone within 30 seconds. This isn't antisocial behavior or disconnection. This is what developmental psychologists call autonomous self-regulation, the ability to maintain emotional equilibrium without constant external input. Research from MIT shows that people who developed this capacity before the smartphone era demonstrate significantly lower rates of anxiety and higher resilience during isolation. Your comfort with your own mind is a form of psychological wealth that can't be taught through an app. It's a developmental advantage that came from living in a different cognitive environment. You possess spatial memory and navigational intelligence that's actively deteriorating in younger populations. Here's what happened in your developing brain without GPS. You learn to create mental maps, remember landmarks, understand directional relationships, and develop an intuitive sense of geography. Your hippocampus, the brain region responsible for spatial memory, underwent intensive training during critical developmental windows. This might show up as your ability to navigate back to a place you've only been once, to give directions using landmarks and left-right instructions rather than just sending a pin, or to maintain orientation in unfamiliar environments. You probably notice when someone takes a different route to a familiar destination, because you've internalized the geography rather than just following blue lines on a screen. This isn't just about finding your way around. This is cognitive mapping ability, and neuroscientists have documented its decline in direct correlation with GPS usage. A University College London study found that people who navigate without digital assistance maintain larger hippocampal volume and better spatial memory into old age. Your brain built this capacity when it was plastic and forming, giving you navigational intelligence that enhances problem-solving ability, 3-dimensional thinking, and even memory formation for non-spatial information. You've developed what researchers call analog social intelligence, the ability to read nuance, navigate ambiguity, and maintain relationships without digital mediation. Here's the neurological reality: your social brain developed by reading facial microexpressions, interpreting tone and body language, managing the discomfort of real-time disagreement, and learning to bond through shared physical presence rather than curated digital personas. You might find yourself picking up on subtle emotional shifts in conversations that others miss, feeling uncomfortable with text-based conflict because you instinctively know important conversations need to happen face to face, or maintaining deep friendships with people you don't talk to constantly because your bond isn't dependent on daily digital check-ins. When you communicate, you're probably aware of the person's full context, not just their words. This isn't being demanding or high maintenance in your relationships. This is possessing what psychologist Sherry Turkle calls the capacity for empathy that requires presence. Studies show that generations raised with smartphone-mediated relationships demonstrate measurably lower empathy scores and reduced ability to interpret nonverbal communication. Your social brain developed in an environment that required full human bandwidth, giving you emotional intelligence that's becoming increasingly precious as digital communication flattens our social interactions. You maintain sequential memory and linear thinking capacity that's eroding in the age of hyperlinks and algorithmic feeds. Here's what's happening cognitively. Your brain learned to follow extended arguments, remember narrative arcs, connect cause and effect across time, and think in logical progressions rather than disconnected fragments. You developed what psychologists call temporal coherence, the ability to hold complex sequences in your mind and understand how information builds over time. This might show up as your preference for consuming information in order rather than jumping around, your ability to remember entire conversations or events as coherent stories rather than disconnected highlights, or your frustration with communication that lacks context or jumps between topics without transition. You probably construct your thoughts in paragraphs while others think in bullet points. This isn't being rigid or old-fashioned. This is maintaining what cognitive scientists call narrative intelligence and sequential processing ability. Research from Stanford shows that constant exposure to non-linear, hyperlinked information is fundamentally changing how younger brains organize and retrieve information. Your capacity for extended logical thinking, for holding multiple steps of an argument in mind simultaneously, and for understanding complex causality gives you analytical abilities that are becoming professionally rare and culturally valuable. If you've ever felt like you're falling behind because you don't adapt to every new platform, can't keep up with the pace of digital communication, or prefer depth over constant connectivity, now you understand what's really happening. You're not technologically incompetent. You're operating with cognitive capacities that developed in a completely different environment, and those capacities represent genuine strengths in a world that's losing them. The truth is, your brain possesses abilities that can't be replicated by growing up with a phone in your hand. Subscribe for more psychology insights that help you understand who you really are and why your mind works the way it does. Your differences aren't deficits. They're distinctions worth recognizing.